G'day ladies and gentlemen, Scotty D here from the Australia's Tabletop Wargaming Network, and welcome in to another installment in our How to Play Warhammer 40,000 10th Edition series. Alrighty ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the ATWN for another installment in our How to Play Warhammer 40,000 10th Edition series, where we talk about how to play the game, any developments in the game, as we're going to be talking about in today's video, as well as how to write armor list and the different ways you can play Warhammer 40k as well. And for today's installment in the series, what we're actually going to be talking about is we're going to be looking at the Pariah Nexus mission pack, as well as the tournament companion and the terrain layouts, to look at some of the changes that have been made since Leviathan and the impact they're actually going to have on the game over the next kind of 12 months or so for the Pariah Nexus season. But before we jump into the content of today's video, I want to thank everyone who does watch our content here on YouTube. You guys have been instrumental in getting us to community monetization, and we are not that far away from unlocking the full abilities of a YouTube partner by having ad revenue on our content as well. And it wouldn't be happening if it wasn't for your guys' support in terms of watching the content that we create and such as well. We're less than 100 subscribers away, so if you haven't subscribed to the network, feel free to hit that subscribe button, turn on that notification bell and such as well. It'd be greatly appreciated to help us get towards that milestone as well. Now, let's jump into it for today's video. There's a lot of changes that we're going to be looking at, so we're going to just dive straight on into them here. Now, the first change we're going to be looking at is there's been a bit of a change in the sequence to setting up of a game compared to Leviathan, which we covered in its own specific video, and I did reference to looking at Leviathan. There has been some changes when it comes to Pariah Nexus, and some of these are fresh additions, whereas some of these are also what was FAQ'd and added into Leviathan over time as well. Now, first up is determining the mission. Now, this change is more for tournament play rather than match play in general, but you can still use it for your regular games. Now, for full context, I don't actually own the Pariah Nexus mission cards at this point, so I am referencing a lot from the tournament companion primarily. So if anything is in this video is incorrect compared to what is in the actual mission deck, please point it out to us down in the comments. I'd really appreciate that additional knowledge for those who do want to find out what the big changes are with Pariah Nexus. So first up with Pariah Nexus, it's actually recommended to use one of the 20 predetermined missions instead of randomly drawing out your deployment, your mission rule, and your primary mission cards to create that mission. Now, personally, from the games that I have played of these 20 missions, the games that I've watched and commentated, I can say that some of these work pretty well and are good. Some of them are okay, and others are just straight up not great to play, particularly when you combine it with the recommended layouts as well. So I definitely would say feel free to create your own combinations of these or modify parts of them as well. Maybe change up the primary mission or change up the mission rule, or maybe change the deployment if you wish to do so, and don't let the recommendations really hinder you in terms of what you're wanting to play. Feel free to experiment and use them as a basis to start out with as well. Now, the next change is for objective markers. Now, this was just an FAQ during Leviathan that was implemented, that when you were using an objective marker, it wouldn't actually impede a miniature's movement when it was placed on the tabletop. Often a lot of players, particularly in the competitive scene, would actually use 7.5 inch in diameter neoprene objective markers, and a lot of players do that in more casual settings as well. Definitely recommend it. Or you're using those 40mm objective markers that come in the Leviathan or the Pariah Nexus set. So previously, you actually couldn't move over them, or you couldn't actually move a miniature over the top of them as well. Whereas now they've actually changed and actually implemented that into the Pariah Nexus pack, where you want to ensure that you have a flat 40mm objective marker or those neoprene markers, even though they don't say that in the pack, of course, but that is another option so that models can move over it, so there's no impediment for your miniatures moving, causing awkward situations if it is kind of this scenic 40mm objective marker style base. Of course, if you're playing Crusade or open play thematic missions, definitely feel free to lean into that. But for the more match play, it definitely does encourage that flat objective marker, so there's no issues with movement and such. Plus, if you're using the neoprene objective markers, it makes it a lot easier to know when you are on the objective, because once you toe onto it, you then know that you're on that objective rather than having to measure it and it being a little bit contentious and stuff as well. So that's definitely a reason why you should also use the neoprene markers, in my personal opinion. The next area that has seen some changes is creating the battlefield. Now, some of these changes are a little bit more nuanced than they actually first appear. Firstly, they recommend that you use the Pariah Nexus terrain layouts in place of creating your own battlefield layouts if you're less experienced putting together a balanced table of terrain, or if you're a more inexperienced TO. However, there is an item missing from Pariah Nexus that was actually included in Leviathan, and that is that objective markers are now allowed to be placed within 1 inch of impassable sections of a terrain feature, such as a ruined wall or things like that. So it means that you can now actually have more of that radius of the objective marker within a terrain feature than what you were able to before as well, when you are setting up tables for your games, or if you're creating your own layouts for competitive play. That restriction has now been removed as well. Now, there has been some other slight changes made to the mission deck, particularly the secondary missions primarily as well. So the first thing is that for the secondaries themselves, they've removed some entirely, such as capture enemy outpost and investigate signal. Those two are just gone. There were some that had slight changes. So deploy teleport homers is now known as established locus, and there's a few that have changed like that, as well as 2 more secondaries being added into the deck, meaning that there is 18 secondary cards in total rather than 16. So it does add a little bit more variability in terms of what you're able to draw, considering that drawing 10 cards, or maybe, if you're drawing additional ones, 10 cards over the space of a 16 card deck, you get through more than half the deck by a significant margin. You get through about 60, maybe 65% of the deck. Whereas with 18 cards in the deck and you're only drawing 10, you're getting just over 50% of the way through, unless you're also cycling through cards. We're going to talk about in a little bit as well. Now, the second part is that there is actually a new fixed secondary option available in one of the new cards that's been added, which is Cull the Horde, and it's specifically an objective that is dealing with units that are quite large. So think like 20 Orc Boys, or units that have a lot of wounds, like say a brick of 10 Terminators that are 30 wounds. Units like that is what this objective really targets as well. Now, the final change when it comes to the secondaries is the new orders stratagem, which this actually allows you to redraw a secondary during your command phase. Now, previously during Leviathan, you could only do it once per game. However, in Pariah Nexus, they've actually removed that limitation, meaning that you are able to use it multiple times throughout a game if you need to do so, or want to do so, by spending that 1 command point to discard a secondary objective during your command phase to then redraw a fresh secondary objective. So you can cycle through more objectives if you wish to do so using your command points. Just means you're a bit more limited in what you're doing on the tabletop as well. Now, the next change that we're actually seeing in terms of gameplay for Pariah Nexus is the removal of gambits and their replacement being added in, which is secret objectives. Now, how these work is at the end of the 3rd battle round, if your primary score is less than or equal to your opponent's primary score, then you can select one of 4 secret objectives to go for. Now, by selecting a secret objective, you are limiting yourself to 20 points from the primary mission, with any additional points being lost, and the score that you get if you do achieve the secret mission gets added to your primary, and it is worth 20 points. So it means that you are sacrificing 10 victory points to be able to go for that secret mission. Now, to score a secret objective, you'll need to meet its conditions that you have chosen. So no more randomly determined. You get to pick which one of the 4 is going to be the best fit for your situation in the game. And then if you do meet that criteria, you get to add those 20 points on to your final primary score to be up to at most 40 points. Now in general, with the Pariah Nexus mission deck, much like the Leviathan cards, there are a few erratas and such that have been made to a couple of the secondaries and the missions and such as well. We won't be reviewing those in today's video, but definitely have a look at the tournament companion document to have a look and see what those changes are, because they do have a bit of an impact on the gameplay. Now, the next change that is related to the secondaries is actually actions. Now, previously in Leviathan, this was not present as a individual rule. It was actually described on each secondary objective card for what a unit would need to do to be able to score that secondary objective, but there were ways to get around some of those, where if you had the assault keyword on at least one model in the unit, then you were still eligible to shoot, therefore you could do the action. So things like that, with the new way that they have defined actions and specified how they work in Pariah Nexus, removes some of those niche cases. Now, this will also impact primary missions such as Scorched Earth, because you will need to perform those actions on Scorched Earth as well. Now, all units except for the following can perform actions during a game. So an aircraft can't do it. If a unit is battle shocked, they are unable to do so. If they have an objective control value of 0, they cannot perform actions like they could previously. If it is within engagement range of an enemy unit, unless it is a Titanic character unit, if it has made an advance or a fallback move, or they are not eligible to shoot this phase, including if they have already shot this phase, they're not able to perform an action. Now, when a unit is performing an action, it is not eligible to make any shooting attacks or declare a charge until the end of the turn, with the only exception being a Titanic character unit. But there are different mission rules that do allow battle line units to perform actions and ignore some of these different limitations, such as them being able to perform an action after they make an advance move or a fallback move, or they're able to perform an action and still shoot, or they can perform an action within close combat range, within engagement range. So there are some of those mission rules that when you're playing a mission, you may want to take advantage of with your battle line unit. Now, I do appreciate that they actually added these action rules back into the Pariah Nexus mission packet, but I really think that if it's something that's going to be carrying through the entire edition like it was in previous editions, it should actually be a part of the core rulebook. And I think that's kind of something that they may have realized should have been in the rulebook from the start. I'm sure we'll see it added in 11th edition. Now, the next part of Pariah Nexus that we're going to be looking at in particular is going to be the tournament companion, as well as digging into the mission pool. Now, as I previously mentioned, they've put together a suite of 20 different mission combinations that they recommend to use for your games, which are also based upon the different deployment mats and terrain layouts. Now, in Pariah Nexus, they've actually reduced the number of mission rules to only being 10 mission rules instead of 12, and there is no chilling rain option. So you're always going to have something that's going on in your games, but they're a lot less impacting than what they were in Leviathan. They've also changed one of the deployments to sweeping engagement. Instead of being a straight line, it's kind of this stepped Dawn of War style deployment. They've also added in a new deployment, which is Tipping Point, very similar to Sweeping Engagement, but it's on the Hammer and Anvil version of it. So one side of the short table edges step forward a bit more, whilst the other side is a bit more reduced. And then they've removed 3 of the primary missions from Leviathan. They've altered 2 of the primary missions, and they've added in 3 new primary missions as well as a whole. So really, there's been a lot of shake-up, and some actually really interesting missions, such as priority targets and sites of power, were removed and replaced with ones such as burden of trust and linchpin. So things like that to improve missions, or maybe they just reworked those missions as well, much like Deploy Servo Skulls and Unexploded Ordnance. Unexploded Ordnance is basically the improved version of Deploy Servo Skulls. So, some are still there, but they did make some significant changes. Now, each of the different recommended missions has a series of associated terrain layouts that they can be played on, but with having between 2 and 6 layouts being able to be used for any one particular mission. So a lot of variety in there, but if you do pick a mission that's only got 2 layouts, limited variety. Now, as I previously mentioned, some of these missions are going to work great, some are going to work okay, and some aren't. So it's best to see how you feel with those missions. Make note if you did particularly enjoy a particular primer or a particular mission rule or deployment, and then feel free to alter that one afterwards as well. Then we come to the terrain layouts that you can actually use during Pariah Nexus. Now, unlike Leviathan, the Pariah Nexus layouts have a lot of quality of life updates to them and improvements to help them be a lot easier to use. Now, first off, they actually tell you how many of the different terrain base sizes you'll actually need for the layout. So when they have designed these, they've all got the same number of layouts, which is 4 of the 6x4 inch bases, 2 of the 10x5 inch bases, and 6 of the 12 by 6 inch bases, meaning you've got 12 different terrain pieces on the table. They've also color coded the different types of terrain in terms of what heights they should be on the different base sizes, with the blue being 2 inches or less in terms of terrain and the gray being taller than 4 inches. So that's something to also bear in mind when you are looking at the layout. They've also got 2 new additions to the details, which are the recommended placement of the ruined walls. Now, that being said, it is the recommended placement. It doesn't have to be the exact same. I know for down under 40k events here in Australia in particular, they use WTC style ruins on Games Workshop layout. So there is that malleability to still use these layouts with different terrain and just take it as a recommendation of where to place the terrain rather than what style of terrain you've actually got on the table. And then there's another set of symbols which tells you whether the pieces are actually a single combined piece or they are 2 separate pieces of terrain, and these are 2 different eye symbols. One is blue to show you that it is a single piece of terrain, and the other one is clear with a red kind of cross sign over the top showing that no, they're 2 separate pieces of terrain, and you'll see them in different places on the terrain layout. Now, in Pariah Nexus, there are a total of 8 different terrain layouts, with only 2 from Leviathan being improved upon within Pariah Nexus, meaning there are 6 fresh terrain layouts to make use of. Now, one of the quality of life updates that I had mentioned is that these are far better than the Leviathan maps, as they've actually included distance measurements for where the bases of these terrain features should actually be positioned on the tabletop that allow precise placement of them for ease of use, rather than you relying on, say, the Tabletop Battles app to get those square inches right in terms of how far it's meant to be, where it's meant to be positioned and such correctly, or guessing the placement if you're just going off the old Leviathan Tournament Companion for where they should be. Now, on the last page of the Tournament Companion, there is a Tournament Organizers page, which provides a bit of guidance and recommendations on how to actually set up your pairings within Best Coast pairings and what you should be doing there, as well as how to handle placements and such as well, and what you should be setting those to actually sort by when you're doing pairings of an event, which again is up to each TO's discretion whether you follow them or not. However, overall, there have been a whole host of changes, not just within the mission pack for Pariah Nexus or the Tournament Companion, but also a ton of new and updated FAQs and rules commentary and the balanced starter slate as well, that you want to make sure you're having a read over so you're all caught up, so you're able to play the most up-to-date version of Warhammer 40k during the Pariah Nexus season for the next 12 months. All right, ladies and gentlemen, well, that concludes our video today. I want to thank each and every one of you for watching this video right the way through. Really do appreciate you guys and hope that you did get a decent amount of stuff out of it. I know Pariah Nexus has been out for about a month and a half now, but I wanted to kind of let everyone else get their content out on it and then do the summary for the newer players out there to kind of summarize what's actually been the most important changes to make note of for your games as you're just getting into Warhammer 40k. Now, if you did enjoy this video, feel free to leave any comments you have, any feedback, anything I missed that's kind of pertinent. Let us know down in the comment section below. If you want to continue to catch more content as well, feel free to subscribe to the channel, turn on that notification bell. And if you like the video, make sure to hit it with a like as well. So, you know, it's going to be able to spread it to more people, inform the YouTube algorithm that it's good content, and then we can continue to grow the channel and improve upon the content we are creating and making it better quality content for you guys. And also, if you do want to interact with us live outside of tournament coverage and YouTube videos, feel free to head over to our Twitch channel over at Australia's TWN, where I do weekly hobbying sessions, or maybe we've got tournament previews and such as well that we have going on over there, where you can ask questions about what's going on. You can interact with me. We can talk live about any questions you have with regards to gaming or rules questions or army lists or painting, anything like that. I'm always open to discussing during our hobbying streams as well. But ladies and gentlemen, I also want to take a second to thank everyone who does financially support us, whether that's on Twitch, whether that's on Ko-Fi, or whether that's here on YouTube. You guys and your financial contributions really do help cover the costs of the business, of our running costs, as well as allow us to invest in new and exciting pieces of gear to continue to provide great Warhammer 40k tournament coverage of the Australian Warhammer 40k tournament scene, which is only getting better and better every event that we do, which I'm completely excited for the plans that I have for next year. And next year is going to be a bumper year for that kind of stuff as well. But if you do want to support us, feel free to check out the memberships here on YouTube. They're $4.99 or $9.99 Australian or you can sub over on Twitch with a Twitch Prime for free if you are an Amazon Prime user, or you can sub over on the Ko-Fi as well, which actually gets us the majority of your patronage funds there as well. But ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank each and every one of you for watching today's video, and I hope to catch you in the next one.